The massive alien ships appeared at the edge of Earth's solar system on a Tuesday morning. Admiral Kethver of the Zelthran hegemony stood on the bridge of his flagship, looking at the small blue planet through the viewscreen. 47 worlds had surrendered to him. This would be number 40-8. The process was always the same. Show overwhelming force. Make demands. Watch the primitive species panic and beg for mercy. Accept their surrender. Move on to the next target. The Zelthrans had perfected this system over 300 years of conquest. Send the standard message. Kethver ordered his communications officer. The message went out across all human frequencies in perfect English, translated by their advanced computers. People of Earth, we are the Zelthran hegemony. Your world is now under our control. You have 24 hours to surrender unconditionally. Lay down all weapons. Prepare for occupation. Resistance will result in the complete destruction of your species. This is your only warning. Kethver expected the usual response: panic, chaos, desperate attempts to negotiate. Perhaps some pathetic show of defiance before inevitable collapse. He had seen it all before. The human response came 6 hours later. No, that was it. One word. No explanations. No negotiations. No begging. Just a simple refusal that echoed across space. Kethver blinked his 4 eyes in confusion. Did they not understand the message? His communications officer checked the translation systems. Sir, the message was perfectly translated. They understood completely. Send it again. Perhaps they need time to process the reality of their situation. The second message was sent. This time, the humans responded faster. We heard you the first time. Our answer remains no. Earth is not for sale, not for rent, and definitely not for taking. If you want it, come and try to take it. On Earth, President Sarah Chun stood in the Situation Room, surrounded by military leaders from every nation. The room was quiet, except for the hum of computers, and the distant sound of air raid sirens beginning there. First test run in decades. They actually said no to the aliens, whispered General Rodriguez from the Joint Chiefs. Ma'am, their fleet could destroy our entire civilization. I know exactly what their fleet can do, General, Chun replied calmly. But some things are worth more than survival. Our freedom is one of them. Within hours, every nation on Earth began mobilizing. Factories that made cars started making armor. Computer programmers began working on weapons systems. Children were evacuated from major cities, while adults prepared for the worst. War in human history. The Zelthrans watched these preparations with amusement. Kethver had seen primitive species try to resist before. It never lasted long once they witnessed superior technology in action. The Admiral, his tactical officer, reported. They appeared to be fortifying their moon base. How many defenders? Perhaps 3,000 humans, sir. Kethver laughed, a sound like grinding metal. 3,000 against our assault fleet? This will be over quickly. Order the attack on their lunar facility. Once they see how easily we crush their best defenses, they will surrender properly. The Zelthran assault began at dawn, Earth time. 50 sleek alien warships approached Luna Base, their weapons charging with deadly energy. The human base was a simple collection of dome buildings connected by tunnels, clearly not designed for military purposes. The first Zelthran energy blasts tore through the outer defenses like paper. Atmosphere rushed out into space. Emergency lights flashed red across the facility. Any reasonable species would have surrendered immediately. Instead, the humans fought back. They had turned their mining equipment into weapons. Massive drilling machines became mobile artillery. Construction mechs became war robots. Even the transport shuttles had been modified with explosive charges, turning them into guided missiles. The Zelthran ships. designed for fighting other advanced civilizations with energy shields and beam weapons. Were not prepared for humans throwing chunks of metal and explosive devices. A mining drill punched through the hull of one ship. A modified shuttle packed with nuclear warheads crashed into another. But the real shock came from the humans themselves. When their weapons failed, they used tools. When their tools broke, they used their hands. When cornered and offered the chance to surrender, they chose to fight to the death rather than give up. Commander Yethala led the ground assault team that finally breached the main dome of Luna Base. He expected to find survivors ready to surrender. Instead, he found the last 50 humans in the facility, gathered in the central chamber. They had built barricades from furniture and equipment. Some were wounded and bleeding. All of them were armed with whatever they could find. An old man held a welding torch like a sword. A young woman clutched a mining laser with both hands. "Surrender now," Yethala commanded through his translator. "Your resistance is over. We offer you life if you submit." The old man stepped forward. His name tag read Chief Engineer Murphy. He looked at the alien commander with tired but determined eyes. "Son," Murphy said slowly, "you can take this base. You can kill every last one of us. But you'll never take our world. Because for every human you kill, 10 more will take our place. We're not just fighting for our lives. We're fighting for our home." The final assault lasted 3 more hours. When it was over, not a single human had surrendered. They had fought until the very end, taking down 12 Zelthran soldiers with primitive weapons and sheer determination. Kethver stared at the casualty report in disbelief. 12 dead, 37 wounded, in a single battle against a primitive species. This had never happened before in 3 centuries of conquest. "Admiral," his communications officer said quietly, "we're receiving a message from Earth." The message was brief. "You have our attention. Come and take the rest." For the first time in his long military career, Admiral Kethver felt something he had never experienced before. While facing an enemy, he felt afraid. The war that followed. Luna Base changed everything the Zelthrans thought they knew about conquest. Admiral Kethver had expected humanity to crumble after witnessing superior alien technology. Instead, humans seemed to view the destruction of Luna Base as a learning experience. Within weeks, Earth's communication networks buzzed with technical analyses of Zelthran weapons. Human engineers studied every piece of alien debris they could find. They measured blast patterns, analyzed metal fragments, and recorded energy readings. Where other species saw hopeless technological superiority, humans saw puzzles to solve. Dr. Elena Vasquez led a team of scientists in a hidden bunker beneath the Rocky Mountains. They worked 18-hour days, surviving on coffee and determination. Around them, walls were covered with diagrams of alien ship designs, weapon specifications, and tactical analyses. Their energy shields operate on a rotating frequency, Elena explained to the military officials gathered around her workstation. But every system has weaknesses. We just need to find the right frequency to disrupt their defenses. "Doctor," General Park interrupted, "these aliens have technology hundreds of years ahead of ours. How can we possibly compete?" Elena smiled grimly. "General, they've been using the same technology for hundreds of years. We've been innovating for all of human history. They think in terms of overwhelming force. We think in terms of problem solving." The first real test of human adaptability came when Zelthran forces attacked the orbital stations around Earth. The aliens expected another quick victory. Instead, they found that humans had spent the months since Luna Base completely reimagining warfare. The space stations had been evacuated of civilians and converted into weapons platforms. But these weren't traditional weapons. Human engineers had connected mining lasers to create focused energy beams. They had turned cargo containers into kinetic projectiles. Most surprisingly, they had filled some stations with nothing but explosives and volunteers willing to manually detonate them when alien ships came close enough. Commander Yethala, now promoted after his success at Luna Base, led the assault on Orbital Station 7. His ship's sensors detected no energy weapons, no particle beams, no advanced defenses. The station appeared helpless. Easy target, he told his crew. Minimal resistance expected. The first surprise was the construction mechs. Humans had modified their space construction equipment into mobile weapons platforms. These machines, designed for building in zero gravity, proved remarkably effective at tearing apart spacecraft. They moved in ways that confused Zelthran targeting systems, using construction techniques like welding and cutting to disable alien ships. The second surprise was the humans themselves. When Zelthran troops boarded the station, they expected to face soldiers. Instead, they encountered engineers, maintenance workers, and technicians who had voluntarily stayed behind to fight. These humans knew every corridor, every system, every weakness in their own station. They turned the environment itself into a weapon. Back on Earth, the transformation was even more dramatic. Every human city became a fortress. Children learned to operate communication equipment, while adults built weapons in their garages. Retirement homes became intelligence-gathering centers where elderly people monitored alien communications. Schools became training grounds where teachers taught students how to make explosives from household chemicals. The Zelthrans had never encountered anything like human civilian resistance. In their experience, non-military populations fled or surrendered when faced with superior force. Human civilians did the opposite. They organized, adapted, and fought back with whatever tools they had available. Mrs. Patterson, a retired schoolteacher from Ohio, exemplified this unexpected resistance. When Zelthran scouts landed near her small town, she didn't run or hide. Instead, she gathered her neighbors and organized them into an intelligence network. Using ham radios and internet connections, they tracked alien movements and reported them to military commanders hundreds of miles away. Alien patrol moving east on Route 34. She reported calmly into her radio, watching the strange creatures through her kitchen window. 3 vehicles, approximately 12 soldiers. They seemed to be scanning for something. Our information helped coordinate a strike that destroyed the entire patrol. Mrs. Patterson had never fired a weapon in her life, but her contribution proved more valuable than many trained soldiers. The Zelthrans found themselves fighting not just human military forces, but an entire species that had mobilized for total war. Human children built communication networks. Human artists created propaganda that strengthened civilian resolve. Human musicians wrote songs that became battle hymns. Even human entertainment changed, as every movie and television show began featuring stories of resistance and victory against impossible odds. Admiral Kethvar studied intelligence reports in his private quarters, trying to understand what was happening. Other species had technology, military forces, and advanced weapons. But humans seemed to wage war with their entire civilization. "Sir," his intelligence officer reported during their daily briefing, "we've intercepted human communications discussing something called total war. They appear to be converting their entire society into a military force." "Elaborate," Kethvar ordered. "Every human institution is now supporting their war effort. Their schools teach military tactics alongside mathematics. Their factories produce weapons instead of consumer goods. Their entertainment industry creates training materials disguised as recreation. Even their religious institutions are providing logistical support." Kethvar felt a chill run through his scaled hide. They're not just defending their territory. They're becoming a warrior species. There's more, sir. Our psychological analysts have studied human behavior patterns. These creatures don't appear to fear death the way other species do. They view death in battle as acceptable if it serves their larger goals. This was the most disturbing revelation yet. The Zelthrans understood tactical sacrifice, but humans seemed to embrace it as a tool of war. Human pilots flew explosive-laden aircraft directly into Zelthran ships. Human ground forces used tactics that assumed massive casualties as acceptable costs. Human civilians volunteered for missions that were essentially suicide runs. The breaking point for many Zelthran soldiers came during the Battle of New Angeles. Human defenders had turned the entire city into a massive trap. Every building was rigged with explosives. Every street was a killing ground. Every civilian was a potential combatant. When Zelthran forces finally took the city after 3 weeks of fighting, they found something that shattered their understanding of warfare. In the ruins of a children's hospital, they discovered a group of human medics who had stayed behind to care for wounded civilians. These medics had continued treating patients even while the battle raged around them. The Zelthrans offered to spare the medical staff if they surrendered. The lead doctor, a woman named Sarah Kim, looked at the alien commander with exhausted but unbroken eyes. "We'll surrender," she said quietly, "when every last patient has been treated and evacuated safely." She died protecting her patients, along with every other medic in the hospital. But they saved 43 civilians before the end. For the first time in Zelthran military history, soldiers began requesting transfers away from combat duty. The casualty reports that once read 0 losses now showed hundreds of dead and thousands wounded. Worse, the psychological damage was spreading through their ranks like a disease. Kethver realized that humans had weaponized something the Zelthrans had never encountered before: hope. Every human death seemed to strengthen rather than weaken their species' resolve. Every defeat became a lesson for future victory. Every tragedy became a rallying cry for continued resistance. The hegemony was learning a terrible truth. They weren't just fighting for control of a planet. They were fighting to break the spirit of a species that refused to be broken. And for the first time in 3 centuries of conquest, they weren't winning. 2 years into the war, Zelthran society began experiencing something unprecedented in their history: doubt. Admiral Kethver received reports that would have been unthinkable before the human conflict. Zelthran civilians were questioning the war. Young Zelthrans were refusing military service. Most disturbing of all, captured human prisoners were being treated with something approaching respect. The change started with Commander Yeth Allah, now a broken veteran of 17 battles against human forces. He sat in the medical bay of his ship, staring at his bandaged hands and remembering the faces of humans he had killed. Unlike other species, the Zelthrans had conquered. Humans looked their enemies in the eyes while fighting. They spoke to their killers even as they died. "Sir," a young medical officer said quietly, "the human prisoners are ready for interrogation." Yeth Allah had captured 3 humans during the latest raid on Earth. Standard procedure required harsh questioning to extract tactical information. But as he entered the holding cell, he found himself looking at something unexpected. The prisoners sat calmly in their restraints. One was an elderly man who looked like someone's grandfather. Another was a young woman barely out of her teens. The third was middle-aged with calloused hands that suggested he worked with machinery. None of them showed the terror that other species displayed when captured. "I am Commander Yeth Allah," he began, activating his translator. "You will answer our questions about human military capabilities." The elderly man, whose identification indicated he was Professor James Wright, smiled sadly. "Commander, we'll answer any questions you want to ask. Not because we're afraid of you, but because we want you to understand what you're really fighting." This was not the response Yeth Allah expected. "You will provide information about human weapons and defenses." "Of course," the young woman replied. Her name was Lisa Chun, and according to captured records, She was an engineering student. But you should know that by the time we tell you anything useful, our people will have already changed everything. That's what we do. We adapt. The middle-aged man, Michael Santos, a factory worker from Detroit, leaned forward in his restraints. "Commander, can I ask you a question? Do you have a family?" Yathala paused. The question seemed irrelevant to interrogation. "I have a mate and 2 offspring. Do you miss them?" The simple question hit Yathala like a physical blow. He had been away from home for 2 years, fighting a war that seemed to have no end. That is not relevant to this interrogation. It's the most relevant thing in the universe, Professor Wright said gently. "Commander, we're not fighting you because we hate your species. We're fighting because we love ours. Every human soldier who dies to protect something beautiful. Our families, our children, our dreams of a better future." Lisa-chan nodded. "I have a little brother back on Earth. He's 8 years old and wants to be an astronaut. Every day I fight is another day. He gets to dream about exploring the stars instead of hiding from them." For the first time since the war began, Yathala found himself thinking about the war from the enemy's perspective. These humans weren't savage warriors seeking conquest. They were people defending their home. The interrogation continued for hours, but it became more like a conversation. The humans answered every tactical question honestly, explaining human military capabilities with surprising openness. But they also talked about human culture, human hopes, and human dreams. They described Earth not as a strategic resource to be conquered, but as a living world filled with irreplaceable beauty. "Commander," Michael Santos said as the session ended, "your people are technologically superior to us. You could probably win this war if you're willing to pay the price. But ask yourself what winning would cost you. And ask yourself if conquest is really worth destroying everything that makes life worth living." That night, Yathala contacted his family through subspace communication. His mate, Selenith, appeared on the screen with their 2 young offspring. "My beloved," she said, "you look tired. Is the war going well?" Yathala stared at his family's faces and realized he couldn't remember the last time he had felt joy. "Sela, what would you do if someone threatened our home? If they wanted to take our children and force us to live under their rule?" His mate's expression grew serious. "I would fight until my last breath to protect our offspring. Any parent would, even if the enemy was far stronger than us. Especially then. Strength doesn't give anyone the right to take what belongs to others." Yathala closed his eyes. His own mate had just explained why humans refused to surrender. The real turning point came when human prisoners began arriving at Zelthran military bases in larger numbers. Standard procedure required these prisoners to be housed in minimal conditions and interrogated aggressively. But something strange happened as Zelthran soldiers spent more time around human captives. The humans were different from any prisoners the Zelthrans had encountered. They sang songs to maintain morale. They told stories to entertain each other during long confinements. They shared food with weaker prisoners and cared for the wounded without being ordered to do so. Most importantly, they treated their Zelthran guards with polite respect rather than hatred. A young Zelthran guard named Kathmir found himself assigned to watch over human prisoners. His first prisoner was an old woman named Dorothy Miller, a retired nurse who had been captured while treating wounded civilians. "Good morning, dear," Dorothy said cheerfully when Kathmir brought her daily food ration. "How are you feeling today?" Kathmir was confused. Prisoners weren't supposed to ask about their guards' well-being. "I am functional." "You look tired, sweetie. Are you getting enough rest?" This war must be very stressful for everyone involved. No prisoner had ever expressed concern for Kathmir's welfare. "Why do you ask? I am your captor." Dorothy smiled the way his grandmother used to smile. "You're also someone's child. Probably someone's hope and dream. War doesn't change that." It just makes us forget it sometimes. Over the following weeks, Dorothy and other human prisoners began having quiet conversations with their guards. They didn't try to escape or gather intelligence. Instead, they simply talked to their captors as if they were people rather than enemies. They asked about Zelthran families, shared stories about Earth, and expressed genuine interest in Zelthran culture. The effect on Zelthran troops was profound. Soldiers who had once seen humans as primitive savages began to recognize them as people with hopes, dreams, and families worth protecting. The psychological distance that made killing easy started to disappear. Reports began filtering back to Zelthran space about something unprecedented. Zelthran soldiers were requesting medical treatment for psychological trauma. Military psychiatrists, who had never dealt with combat stress in 3 centuries of easy conquest, found themselves overwhelmed with cases of what humans called battle fatigue. Admiral Kethver read the reports with growing concern. His soldiers weren't just losing battles. They were losing the will to fight. Worse, some were beginning to question whether the war was justified at all. The crisis deepened when human prisoners began a campaign that shattered Zelthran propaganda completely. Instead of complaining about their treatment or demanding better conditions, they began teaching their guards about Earth. They described human art, music, literature, and culture. They talked about human achievements in science, medicine, and exploration. They painted a picture of humanity not as a threat to be eliminated, but as a civilization worth preserving. The final blow to Zelthran morale came when the humans did something unthinkable. They began expressing sympathy for their captors. "This war must be very hard for your people," Professor Wright told Commander Yeth-Ala during one of their conversations. "You've spent centuries conquering helpless species. You were probably told this would be easy. Now you're facing heavy casualties for the first time. Your soldiers are dying far from home, fighting people who just want to protect their families. That must be creating enormous psychological pressure on your entire society." Yeth-Ala realized with horror that the human professor was right. The war was destroying Zelthran society from within. They had created a military machine designed for easy conquest, not prolonged conflict. Their entire social structure was based on the assumption that they would always be the overwhelmingly superior force. Humans had shattered that assumption, and in doing so, they had weaponized something the Zelthrans had never expected to face. They had weaponized empathy itself. The end began not with a great battle, but with a single transmission from Earth. Admiral Kethver received it in his private quarters while reviewing the latest casualty reports. The numbers were staggering. 30,000 Zelthran dead, over 100,000 wounded, and psychological trauma affecting nearly every soldier who had faced human resistance. The transmission came from an unexpected source: the human prisoners aboard his own ship. "Admiral Kethver," Professor Wright's voice said through the communication system, "we would like to request a meeting, not for negotiation or surrender, but because we believe there are things you need to understand about this war." Kethver found himself walking to the holding cells despite every protocol that said he shouldn't engage directly with prisoners. When he arrived, he found all the human captives gathered together. They had been allowed to associate freely because, unlike other species, they never attempted escape. Instead, they seemed content to wait and observe. "Admiral," Professor Wright said respectfully, "thank you for coming. We wanted to show you something that your intelligence officers may not have reported." Lisa Chun activated a small device that projected holographic images. Kethver expected to see military intelligence or tactical information. Instead, he saw something that made his breath catch. The images showed Earth during the war, but not the battles and destruction he expected. They showed human children attending school in underground bunkers, where they learned mathematics and science alongside emergency procedures. They showed elderly humans tending gardens in bomb shelters, preserving seeds and plants for the future. They showed human artists creating music, poetry, and paintings, even as their world burned around them. "Admiral," Lisa said quietly, "this is what we're really fighting for. Not territory or resources or strategic advantage. We're fighting for this, for the right to teach our children, for the chance to create beauty, for the hope that tomorrow can be better than today." Michael Santos stepped forward. "Sir, with respect, your people don't understand what war costs us. You think we fight because we're savage or primitive. We fight because we're human. And being human means protecting the things that make life meaningful." Dorothy Miller, the elderly nurse, smiled gently at the Admiral. "Young man, how long has it been since you've seen your family?" The question hit Kethver like a physical blow. 2 years. "Have you told them you love them recently?" Kethver felt something break inside his chest. The war. There has been no time." "There's always time for love," Dorothy said softly. "That's what humans have learned. War takes everything from us except what we choose to protect. We choose to protect love. What do your people choose to protect?" That night, Admiral Kethver made an unprecedented decision. He opened communications with the Zelthran High Council and requested permission to negotiate with human leadership. The request was denied. The council ordered him to continue the assault until human resistance was completely broken. Instead, Kethver did something no Zelthran admiral had ever done. He disobeyed direct orders. The first diplomatic contact between humans and Zelthrans took place in a neutral zone near Jupiter. Kethver brought a small delegation of officers, including Commander Yeth Allah. The humans sent President Chun, General Rodriguez, and Dr. Elena Vasquez. The meeting began formally, with each side stating their positions. But it quickly became something unprecedented in galactic history. A conversation between two intelligent species trying to understand each other. "Admiral," President Chun said, "we need you to understand something fundamental about humanity. We don't want to destroy your people. We don't seek conquest or domination. We simply want to be left alone to live our lives in peace." "Your resistance has cost us thousands of lives," Kethver replied. "Our society is in chaos. Our military is demoralized. Our people are questioning everything we believed about our place in the galaxy." Dr. Vasquez leaned forward. "Admiral, that's not our fault. That's the natural result of trying to force an entire civilization into slavery. Any species with dignity would resist." General Rodriguez added, "We've analyzed your military capabilities. You could probably defeat us eventually if you're willing to commit your entire civilization to total war for the next 50 years. But ask yourself, what would be left of the Zelthran people after that kind of commitment? What would you become?" Commander Yeth Allah spoke for the first time. "They would become like humans, willing to sacrifice everything for a cause they believe in." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. President Chun smiled sadly. "Commander, you're beginning to understand. War doesn't make us stronger. It makes us desperate. We fight with such determination because we know what we'll lose if we don't. Every human who dies in this war dies defending something irreplaceable. Our freedom, our families, our right to dream." "But what happens to your dreams if you win?" Kethver asked. "That's the terrible irony," Dr. Vasquez replied. "Every day this war continues, we become a little less human. We turn our schools into military training centers. We convert our art into propaganda. We transform our entire civilization into a war machine. If this continues long enough, we might defeat you, but we'll destroy ourselves in the process." The truth hit both sides simultaneously. The war was forcing each species to abandon everything that made them who they were. Kethver closed his eyes. "What do you propose?" "Withdrawal," President Chun said simply. Your forces leave our system. We promise never to pursue or attack Zelthran territory. We go our separate ways and hopefully someday we can meet again under better circumstances. My government will never accept such terms." General Rodriguez smiled grimly. "Admiral, with respect, your government isn't fighting this war. Your soldiers are. Your families are paying the price. Your society is bearing the cost. What do they want?" 3 days later, Admiral Kethver made an announcement that shocked both species. The Zelthran fleet would withdraw from human space immediately. Officers who disagreed with this decision were free to request transfer to other commands. Those who supported the decision would be given the chance to explain their reasoning to the High Council. To everyone's surprise, 90% of the Zelthran military supported the withdrawal. The war ended not with surrender or conquest, but with understanding. The Zelthrans left human space quietly, carrying with them a new appreciation for the cost of forcing their will on others. The humans watched them go with relief, but also with a strange sadness for the soldiers they had come to respect as worthy opponents. Years later, when the first peaceful contact was established between humans and Zelthrans, both species discovered something remarkable. The war had changed them both. Humans had learned that their capacity for compassion was as powerful as their capacity for destruction. Zelthrans had learned that true strength came not from dominating others, but from protecting what mattered most. The galaxy learned a different lesson. There were some species it was safer to leave alone, not because they couldn't be conquered, but because the act of conquering them would cost the conqueror their soul. Humanity's greatest victory wasn't defeating a superior enemy. It was showing that enemy what it meant to be human, and teaching them to choose peace not from weakness, but from wisdom. The war was over. The real work of healing two civilizations was just beginning.